She broke the hospital's strict rules to save a bleeding stranger. Hours later, Marines in uniform flooded the lobby, and what followed turned this nurse into a national hero. Watch till the end to see how a single act of courage reshaped healthcare forever. And if you believe compassion matters more than protocol, subscribe for more true, emotional stories like this one. It was just past midnight when Nurse Rachel Vance heard the sliding doors crash open at Crestbrook Medical Center. A man stumbled in, blood pouring down his arm, leaving a crimson trail behind him. His name was Marcus Kane, and he looked like he could collapse at any second. Rachel had seen injuries before, but this was different. His artery was likely cut, and his skin had already turned a scary shade of gray. Rachel rushed toward him, but her supervisor barked, "Protocol first. Registration forms now." Rachel stood frozen. If she acted, she would lose her job. If she didn't, the man might die on the cold hospital floor. But in that moment, she didn't think about her career or rules. She only thought, what if this was my brother? What if he had no one else? Without saying a word, she grabbed Marcus by the arm and guided him straight to Trauma Room 2, shouting for a doctor. Her hands pressed hard on the wound as she called for saline, pressure wrap, and blood transfusion kits. Her voice trembled, but her hands stayed firm. She was now officially in violation of hospital policy, as she knew this might be her last shift. Marcus whispered, "Please, don't let me die." She held his gaze and whispered back, "Not tonight. Not on my watch." Outside, her supervisor was already calling administration. But what Rachel didn't know, Marcus Kane wasn't just any patient. And soon, the entire hospital would find out. This wasn't just a nurse saving a man. This was the moment everything changed. 6 hours after the life-saving trauma procedure, Nurse Rachel Vance sat in a cold, narrow office with white walls and even colder faces staring back at her. Across the table, the hospital administrator read from a file, already filled with disciplinary notes, ready to pronounce her fate. "You knowingly violated the emergency intake protocol," he said. "This is your third offense. We have no choice." But before the words, "You're terminated," could leave his lips, a loud voice echoed through the hallway outside. "Marines, incoming. Lobby's full. You need to see this, now." Everyone rushed out, and what they saw silenced even the loudest critics. Dozens of Marines, standing tall in full dress uniform, had packed the hospital lobby. Their polished boots echoed against the tile. Every patient, nurse, and visitor stared in shock. At the front of the formation stood a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like thunder. "I'm Captain Naomi Kane. This hospital fired the nurse who saved my father's life. That ends today." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Marcus Kane wasn't just some man who wandered in bleeding. He was a decorated war hero, a 3-time Afghanistan veteran. And this powerful woman was his daughter. Media crews flooded in within minutes. Cameras clicked, lights flashed. Headlines rolled out instantly. "Nurse fired for saving war hero." But the hospital did the unthinkable. They fired Rachel anyway, and that was the spark. The next morning, hashtags like #Justice for Rachel, #NurseHero, and #Veteran Stand Up were trending worldwide. The hospital had no idea what they had just done, because now it was no longer a hospital policy issue. It was a national crisis. Rachel Vance stood quietly in front of the hospital board, her hands still stained from Marcus Kane's blood, her name already trending nationwide as the nurse who chose life over policy. Everyone expected her to be escorted out, forgotten like every other healthcare worker who ever spoke up. But something no one predicted was about to unfold. Outside, a sea of Marines in full dress uniform filled the hospital entrance, holding signs that read, "You don't fire heroes." Cameras flashed, nurses wept, and donors began pulling out, publicly shaming Crestbrook Medical Center for punishing compassion. Then walked in Congressman Luis Romero, a war veteran himself, with national news crews following behind him. He didn't sit. He didn't wait for permission. He simply said, "This woman is why my brothers are still alive. If this board doesn't reverse course today, we'll bring this to Congress tomorrow." Board Chair Dr. Sandra Walker, herself a former military surgeon, stood in silence until she slowly nodded and said, "Ms. Vance, we were wrong." The announcement stunned the nation. Rachel was reinstated. promoted to Chief of Emergency Protocol, and awarded a National Healthcare Bravery Medal. But it didn't stop there. The trauma bay, where Marcus Kane was saved, it was renamed the Marcus Kane Emergency Wing, and Rachel? She became a voice for every silenced, struggling, overworked nurse in America. She didn't just win her job back, she changed the rules forever. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is break the rules for the right reason. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and stay with us for more stories of quiet heroes who choose humanity first.